Hi, my name is Rick Friedrich. What if I told you that we've been building our houses the wrong way for a long, long time? So normally I talk about alternative energy in my videos, so today I'm going to look at it from a different angle. Something that I've considered for a long time, and I've actually seen the benefits of. So you spend a lot of money on either heating or cooling your house or both. Up here in the north of the United States, Michigan, we spend quite a bit of money on heating our homes and cooling our homes in the summertime. So this can be largely eliminated just by the way we build our houses. Now today I'm going to talk about the earth shelter umbrella effect. And it's something that you should all consider, especially on a new construction house. But you can actually incorporate it into an existing house to some degree, and that's what I want to talk about today. And that's what I did in my first house. So when we think about a house, represented by this box perhaps, and I think, yeah. So it's above the ground and it's exposed to the elements. It's exposed to the air flow. But what is the ground? The ground, which is going to be symbolized by this plastic sand, whatever this is called. The ground represents about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, all year round, if it is insulated. So we build our houses above ground, and what do we experience in our basements? This very effect that I'm talking about. Our basements remain relatively cool throughout the summer, and actually warmer in the wintertime than outside. So what do? We build our houses above ground. And what do? We actually have to maintain these houses. The roof has to be replaced every 25 years, the siding, what have you. And we don't have any use of the roof itself. So what if we built our houses, I'm not going to say under the ground. Okay, so that's the big misunderstanding. A proper earth shelter won't be actually below the ground, or at least the level, the flat ground. We want to be above that because we don't want to have to deal with flooding. So if you have to deal with flooding, you don't want to deal with an earth shelter. So we want a house above the ground, but we want it covered with the earth or suitably insulated so that we benefit from the temperatures of the ground, right? So anyway, there's right and wrong ways to do it. When you search the internet, when you search for people and you look around, you see these earth shelters. Many times they're built wrong, and people don't know what they're doing. So it really needs to incorporate this umbrella effect. And what is that? So what does an umbrella do? Right? You put the umbrella up in the air, and you've got this canopy above you, and what happens? The water comes down and rolls off, right? It doesn't get you wet. So this is the idea that, a major part of this idea is that the rain or the water is actually what cools the ground before the freezing periods in the fall, and then the ground freezes up more readily when you have moisture in it. So you have your frost line and so forth. I'm not going to get into all the details here, just the very basics to introduce this idea. So the umbrella effect will incorporate a shielding from the water, and thus also insulating the ground so that it doesn't have direct contact with the um, with freezing, and that's mainly considering the winter problem. In the summer, we don't have to worry about that as much. So anyway, I incorporated this into my first house when I had a water problem. So this also can relate to water leaking into your basement. So I had this old house, maybe 200 years old. I'm really not certain of what age it really was, but it had these big stone walls, and they weren't very well sealed. So I would get water coming in, even though my house was up a little bit, so it wasn't really a problem for flooding. I still would get water coming off the roof and somehow making it leaking into the basement, which is a problem. So normally you dig all the way down the side of the wall and you do things, seal up the wall, whatever. It's a big job though to go all the way down to dig. So what I did was incorporated a partial umbrella effect scenario. So what I did is I dug 2 feet down on the outside of the wall that was allowing the water to come in. I went 2 feet down and 4 feet out, and then I built up a slope from the 2-foot drop all the way up to the higher levels. So then what I did is what you call the umbrella effect. So I got this aluminum covered sheets of styrofoam, or whatever the foam they put on the sides of the houses, right? And so what I did is I went, so this is the side of the house, for example, and I went like this. So say this was, it's not covered like this, it's just usually on one side. But I went, so say this is the side of the house, and I went down like this, out 4 feet, down 2 feet, and then what I did is put 3 sheets of plastic above or on top of it all. Put the dirt back on, and then, this was very cost effective, very easy to do. With a backhoe, of course, it's easy, but to dig down only 2 feet, approximately 4 feet out, and you don't have to dig down right at the front of the house, you just go on a slope, it's relatively easy compared to digging down, 10 feet, 8 feet, or whatever you gotta dig. So I put 3 sheets of plastic, and depending on the thickness of your plastic, you don't need necessarily 3. And then I made sure that it was really tight up at the top here so that no water could get in there one way or another. And then put the dirt back on here. And so what happens is this dirt underneath here remains dry and then insulated. And you don't really need a whole lot of insulation to make it insulated, because the ground is really a good insulator. So when the water comes down, it rolls away from the house. And so you can get into, a whole bunch of different particulars if you want to put, kind of stones there or whatever. And give it, depending on how much water comes down, you have to consider all those things. So this is the basic idea that it worked. It successfully worked. So that on the other side of my house, which was the side that the wind was coming at, I had this big, huge old house way up in the air, and this, the wind just came flat against the side of that house. So it was an old house, and this was the top part above the stones. And so I actually made another room, actually made 2 more rooms, and one of them was a cellar, and another one was a bedroom. And I actually went up. I built a really thick wall, at least 8 inches anyway, and made a really solid wall. And then I put rubber on the outside of that wall, and then I had I built a hill up the side in the same way. But I put these sheets down on top. So say we have again the building, and this time I only went up partially because I wanted a window there. So I only had a half covered room there with earth, and I did the same thing. And then I poured the dirt over top. So in this case it's a little bit more difficult because I had this hill coming down, and I wanted some earth above that, and so you have to do it in such a way that you keep the earth from rolling off of this, and so grass and whatever holds it together with the roots, and so now you have this little hill that you could make a garden on if you wanted to, or whatever, and even play on, depending on how thick the layer of earth was on top of that. Now I made another room that went right up to the top, and so that was my cellar room, and that remained perfect the way I wanted it. Now you have to brace the wall, and you have to do stuff like that. But that was an existing home, and it changed a lot. That whole side of the house then was a lot better protected against the wind coming up against it. And it really wasn't, it's really not too much, guys, to make your house, 6 inch instead of 4 inches, like a 2x4. To go up that 2 inches makes a huge difference in your R value, how you can seal that wall. But anyway, I went to 8 inches and so forth. And of course, on my windows, I did a really good quality window, and you're only as good as your drapes. So if you really want to keep the heat in your home, keep it cool in the summertime, if you have thick drapes, that will make a big difference. But anyway, let's go to this umbrella effect on a whole scale, on a larger scale. So let's look at my little table here, and I'm going to start off with showing you my little illustration here. So here we have, don't be upset with me because I have my daughter's little somewhat pink house here, but this is the one I just wanted to grab. And so here you have a very interesting house, beautiful house that my daughter made. And so it's above ground, right? So what we're wanting to do is start from the very beginning. And that is, okay, we want to look for a property that has hills before we even start, if we want to just start from scratch here. Now, today's culture is largely anti-natural, let's just say. We're all into building these big houses on little properties and live in front of the TV. Is that not correct? Move towards the city, concrete jungle, and so you can't really do these things in the city. But we have so much land still left in this world that literally every family in the world could do this if we actually spaced out. And the other thing is, we could utilize the space that isn't being used on the top of our houses. So we could have our gardens and we could play, the kids could play or whatever, on top of our houses. So this doesn't need to take up a whole lot more space than what we already are using. And in certain places, when you do a new construction, you have to have so much greenery around, so much grass and before it's allowed. I know that was in southern Florida, the law. When you are building a new building, you have to still have so much percentage green. So when we look at a new construction now, what we want to do is not, like I said, dig a hole in the ground per se and try and build into this ground on a lower level. Now we could do that. Some have shown doing something like that, like an in-ground greenhouse. I've seen some guys do that. I've been thinking about that for years, where you literally build it. The only thing is, like I said, you have to watch for water coming in and those kinds of problems. But like a greenhouse with literally just the top of glass, and you literally go down into it, you can have the same benefit. So now, in a house though, what you want to do is actually, you could do this where you take away, if you have a big enough property, take away the earth that you're going to use away from maybe a back part of the property or wherever you want to do it. And then what you're doing is, like, you're going to build your frame, like I said, above the ground like you'd normally have it. And now you're going to bring this earth and cover it over. And then what you want to do is have your, if you're in the northern hemisphere, the sun comes from the south. So we actually want our pond or whatever, if we want to have a hole in the ground somewhere, if we don't want to bring in the earth from somewhere else, we want a place that the water runs off, and that would be into the north. So in the north, then you would have the lower point. So you have water coming down, running off the sides of the house and primarily the back of the house. So it goes down, out, and away from the house, below the ground level, because you never want to have water coming into your house. That's the main problem with earth shelters, is when people build them below the ground, and they can have that musty sense and everything else. So we don't want to have that. We don't need to have that. This is like a cave effect, building a house into a cave. I mean, you don't want to have the bare walls of a cave and live in a cave, actually, but the idea of that as above ground and utilizing the ground as your base point temperature. So now what we do is we build a house. So before we get to the house, here we've got our, so here we've just taken out, like, this is not going to be a good representation, but all I'm wanting to do is show you the basics. So now we have all this earth here, and so let's just say behind me right here is going to be the water runoff. So if we were to build our house, let's do it like this then. Let's make, this one's a little bit big. So let's represent this as the house here. And so now what we're going to do is, before this actually, I want to build a steel cage. Make this thing solid that you can drive over it. You don't have to do it that much, but the cost of materials to do this kind of idea is not going to be really any different than the cost of materials to build a regular house. And so you don't have to get into all the cosmetics, the siding and all that extra expense here. We can just do it really, we can rough it. It's rough carpentry here, folks. So anyway, the idea is that we know what you're doing, first of all. And the idea that, oh, you're not going to have enough light in your house is actually not true. When you build it correctly, you can have skylights coming in here and there, and you build it in such a way that the front of the house is like this, and you're getting so much light. And so what happens is you build it up on the front, nice and high, where the light is, and then you've got your like skylights on the top, and then you've got your bay window, whatever. You have all the same thing as you have in the front of your house. And then what happens is, don't build your walls necessarily all the way up in your house. So you let that light go to the back rooms. And then you can have some skylights back there as well. So you decide which rooms are the most important to have the most light, and where do you spend the most time in, and so forth. And then you build it accordingly. And really, when people have done it right, they have a lot more light in their homes than a typical house that is not at all built in the direction of the sun. Where I live, there's not one window that I can grow anything except for one tiny spot, one window that part of the year I could grow, because I've got all these big trees around and the sun is just not in the line of sight of any window. And there's windows everywhere. And so what I'm saying is, we can actually have you can have a beautiful house, but you got to plan it out first. You don't want to just build it and then decide what you're going to do inside. You got to plan it from the ground up. So once you plan it right, the cost could be about the same. When you have it all ready to go and you know what you're doing, then you could rent equipment and so forth if you're going to do it yourself, and just plan it all at once. So the idea again is building this steel cage mentality here, or mentality, the steel frame, more or less like this. Then you have you build the whole frame, so forth, and then you put rubber over top of it, and you could put concrete over that too. And then you have a layer of earth on top of it, right? And then you build it up in such a way that it's not going to roll off anytime soon. And then you have another layer, perhaps, of, like, you might not need to do rubber twice, but you have a sufficient layer of earth between a layer of plastic of some sort. And I would say rubber, this rubber stuff that I put this on my roof, not this particular one, but you can get these sheets of rubber at the Home Depot and places like that. And it's not terribly expensive, but it's going to hold that water out no matter what. And you can get different thicknesses. So even without having to put insulation or what have you, you can just put a layer of rubber and then go maybe like another foot, of earth. So that way it's, if you're really wanting to do stuff on the top of your house and not have any worries, then I would say about a foot up. So you have a sufficient layer of earth, and now it is, the water is not going to go through it down to the roof. Now you could have, all sorts of water runoffs in different ways, to get that water, if you're worried about it washing away the earth or whatever. You can do a whole bunch of things there. I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff right now. But anyway, the point is now that you have mainly the water, you want to channel it down into a certain area, big enough area. At the bottom, you would have your either some kind of pond. Now this is far enough away from the house. You want some clearance, a distance between you and a body of water. But otherwise, If you don't want a body of water, you can have it go into a rock drainage of some sort, and depending on how much water, how big the house is, you have to build it accordingly. And so the water goes into the ground and away, you know, not in a clay ground, but, you know, so forth into a suitable means. Now the other thing is that you want to build this so that the water rolls off the sides of the house on the same way, and that as long as it goes below the level of the ground and doesn't come back up in to the level of the house, then you're set. So that's the basic idea. You can make somewhat of a wooden frame, but I would say you want to hold the weight with the steel frame, and then, you know, have it come off to the sides sufficiently as well, so that you're not putting too much weight on there. I mean, I wouldn't be driving a car on top of that necessarily. I mean, you could make it strong enough to do that. But so then you have this capability of the back here. You know, the slope on the back. You can have all these areas of cellars and so forth in the back of a house, and you could have different ways of getting into there. If you want to have a back door or whatever, that's all possible. So that's the basic idea, and like I said, you could use the foam on some extent, not well, tin foil, I guess, yeah. So yeah, here's another, you know, just like a big umbrella over it, like that, so it rolls off either direction, and then you have your windows and so forth. Now, I told this to my friend some months ago, and he built himself a rabbit earth shelter, and it worked, as far as I remember. I'll have to ask him what's the latest on that, but it's worked, and so you can build this for outbuildings as well. And so one of the major things that I see, it agrees me to realize that people die because of their homes in tornadoes. And so throughout a big part of our country here in the US, we experience a lot of tornadoes, and houses are demolished. Now this would prevent that from happening, because a tornado goes above the ground, right? So if you actually have a tornado coming along, it may seem weird, but if there's nothing else around, nowhere else to go, get into a ditch, and literally the tornado will go above you. And not to say it won't throw things around and you could get hit by the landing debris, but it actually is above the ground. So in this concept, it would just literally go right above your house and pass on. The worst case scenario in that would be that you might have something hitting your front windows. So, you know, you could have these shutters to do that. I think we had shutters once upon a time in our early history here. Now they're just decorations, but that would be something. You would never have to worry about your house being destroyed. So I imagine if this became popular, the insurance levels would be much better if you had this, because you'd never be in danger of a tornado. So it always, you know, makes me wonder when I see, you know, all these houses destroyed. It's just kind of like we're living for the present. We're not considering the future. And, you know, when we think about, there's not much difference in, like I said, time and expense to build these homes. So here's what you're saving. You're saving your house. This is the type of house that would never need to be replaced. In other words, there isn't, once you build it, it's there. And once it's done right, there's no need to ever, you don't have to replace the siding or the roof ever again. And presumably you're going to use good windows in there. So the only kind of exposed areas are the front of the house, which, you know, is very little maintenance when you think about it. compared to a roof and all that. So now you don't have maintenance to really worry about. You don't have to worry about tornadoes. And now you've got a house that remains relatively 55 degrees all year round. So it's a lot easier to heat your house from 55 degrees up than it is to heat it from minus 20 degrees or whatever, 0 degrees. And not only that, is it will hold that heat. So literally, you with your cooking, your lights, and your own body heat will keep that place almost to a temperature, a desired temperature. So it takes very little heat. And I've been in homes that have half earth shelter, where just one wall, kind of like my home was with those 2 rooms. And just with that, like they had literally one, in the cold winter, they had literally one block of wood heating all night long, and then they had to open the windows. It got so hot in there. So, you know, it doesn't really take a lot. I remember first hearing about this years ago with this guy who was getting a cord of wood for the whole winter. I was like, wow, I could use a cord of wood a week to heat my home, and he was doing that for the whole year. And so he described how he had a partial earth sheltered home, and it wasn't a full, otherwise probably need only a face cord or less for the whole year. So now you can get into this concept with, you know, the geothermal water, you know, and all that kind of stuff as well, but I'm not getting into that right now. But yeah, so it's a good idea. It's going to save you that maintenance, and then space, like I said. So now you have this whole area that you can do whatever you want on there, right? And you have this high point, and you can look from a distance, and whereas on your roof, whoever goes on their roof, right? You got your balcony. So now you have all this green, and you can have a garden there or what have you, and you're set. And so you have conserved a lot of space on your property that you would normally not use at all. So money you'll save over time if you care about the future. Space you'll save, and this house, like I said, you'll save on maintenance, and it's a house that could last for thousands of years, literally, if it was built right, because it's not going to get wet. So what happened in Egypt, Egypt has been able to preserve, found many things perfectly preserved because there's no moisture in Egypt, and so fragments of papyrus and what have you have survived for thousands of years because of that kind of environment. So here we're doing the same sort of thing, and if you have any kind of moisture still coming in, the humidity, you can still dehumidify that fairly easy too. So now this is not getting into all the air channels and so forth that you want to build into this, and I can show some. You can just, if you actually type in Google earth shelter umbrella effect, you're going to find these images. You know, make sure you look at the umbrella effect so the water can run off and you can see these ideas. So yeah, you just literally want to put this dirt on top. So it's not so much a hole in the ground, like I said. It's a man-made cave that is above ground. So that's the key point. So I don't think there's anything more I need to say here. I just thought I would share that, because rather than, like, we can create free heat, I can create free energy of various sorts, but why not start the right way? You know, why not build things right from the beginning, and then not have to, do so much more to, rectify a mistake. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.